Isaiah's hand trembled slightly as he reached for the black duffel bag resting at his feet, its worn leather edges frayed like the last nerve in a long week. The rain outside Atlanta Hartsfield thudded rhythmically against the terminal glass, echoing a strange, pulsing warning no one else seemed to hear. You're not here by accident. You clicked this because something inside you whispered that this isn't just another headline, that maybe, just maybe, someone buried the truth and you were meant to dig it up. This isn't a conspiracy. This is a memory no one talks about but everyone feels. The kind of story that shivers down your back when the house is too quiet. A file you were never supposed to open. A truth that didn't disappear. It was erased. One detail at a time, one silence after another. And it all began with a single, unthinkable question. What happens when the pilot, the one who trained everyone else, who built the sky with her hands, is denied boarding her own plane? Not as a mix-up, not as a mistake, but by design. The woman's name was Kendra Whitlow, and if you've never heard of her, that's not your fault. It's because they don't want you to. Born in Savannah, raised on Southern grit, and the kind of still mornings where truth echoes louder than voices, she wasn't just a pilot. She was the youngest black woman to captain a commercial Boeing, 87 in U.S. history. Revered in silence, ignored in rooms that feared her brilliance, she'd walked into cockpits with the kind of confidence that couldn't be taught, only carved. And yet on May 4th, she stood just 10 feet from Gate 47B with a boarding pass in hand. Her name typed in bold, her credentials 3 layers deep, and a steward looking her dead in the eye, saying words that would never make it into the incident report. You're not authorized to board. No explanation, no escalation, just stillness. A silence that vibrated, the kind you hear right before something breaks. Passengers moved around her like ghosts, oblivious, eyes glazed like they were watching a movie on mute. And in that, and as she stepped away without a word, without raising her voice, something happened that would never be caught on surveillance, because the camera feed went black for exactly 13 seconds. When it returned, she was gone. Vanished. Her duffel still at the gate, her ID resting neatly atop it. The flight took off. No delays. But the co-pilot, Chad Monroe, was found 3 hours later locked in a hotel bathroom, muttering a phrase, over and over in a voice hoarse from screaming. She said my name before I told her. She said my name before I told her. You don't need to believe this. In fact, you're better off if you don't. But then tell me, how did Kendra's voice, calm and low, come through the intercom of Flight 228 2 days later? A flight she wasn't on, a route she'd never flown. Passengers described the same thing, 30 seconds of static, then a voice saying, "Tell them I was already there." The airline denied it. The logs were wiped. But a 6-year-old girl, named Elsie, flying with her father, spoke the name Kendra before they even boarded. No one had said the name out loud. Not once. You think that's the strange part? It isn't. Because 4 months later, the airline collapsed from the inside. Executive resignations, unexplainable data losses. Aircraft malfunctions that mirrored exact simulations Kendra had logged in training over a decade earlier. As if the entire system was being dismantled not from the outside, but from within, by someone who knew exactly how to make it bleed. You want to know who finally connected the dots? A former mechanic who swears he saw her walking past Hangar 17 at 3 a.m. last week. No badge, no ID, just the same pressed uniform. And as he reached for his phone, she turned and whispered just 3 words. Words that are about to change everything you think you know about this story. You're next, Adam. But here's the thing. His name wasn't Adam. And no one ever told her it was. Adam's breath hitched as the words hung in the cold air, brittle and sharp as shattered glass. You're next, Adam. The voice was low, too low like a half-remembered, echo buried beneath layers of static and doubt. He blinked, the terminal lights blurring into one another as if someone had flipped a switch and dimmed the whole world at once. But the name, his name, had never been spoken to him by her, not once. And yet, That night in Hangar 17, standing, alone under the flickering fluorescent bulbs, the whisper had sunk under his skin, crawling in like a secret no one wanted him to hear. He wanted to believe it was a trick of the mind, a hallucination conjured by exhaustion, or the slow erosion of months spent chasing shadows in a story no one else would touch. But the air had a weight to it, heavy like the kind that presses on your chest when something unspoken coils beneath. The surface. Adam shoved his phone back into his jacket, hands trembling. The recording app had somehow stopped during the whisper. No trace of it existed except the haunting silence captured in that half-minute gap, and every attempt to replay it came back with the same corrupted file warning. File cannot be played. Was it a glitch or something worse, something deliberate? The doubt settled in like a second skin, suffocating. He wasn't sure what was real anymore. Not the disappearing pilot, not the broken flights, not even the chilling message. Even his own memories felt suspect. Days he couldn't place, conversations that slipped away like water through clenched fingers and flashes of faces in his mind that might have been nightmares or memories. There were moments, too, when he heard Kendra's voice not in his headphones, but faintly, from nowhere. Soft murmurs trailing through the static in his apartment, or drifting on the breeze when the city was still. Sometimes he thought he saw her silhouette in the corner of his vision, but when he turned, nothing was there but shadows. He wasn't alone in his unraveling. Enter June Harper, a former investigative journalist who had crossed paths with Adam weeks ago while chasing the same fragmented story. A real unsolved mystery, she called it. The kind of thing people pretended didn't exist because it scared them too much. But June was an enigma herself, unreliable and slippery, slipping in and out of Adam's life like a ghost tethered to the edges of his sanity. Her voice was hypnotic, full of fragmented truths and wild theories, her eyes dark, pools that seemed to carry secrets she wasn't ready to share. She claimed to have uncovered recordings from deep within the airline's archives, hidden files that contradicted everything official channels admitted. "Adam, listen," she whispered once in a smoke-filled cafe where the air hung heavy, with secrets and cigarette smoke. "There are tapes where Kendra's voice confesses things that don't match what she said before. It's like someone rewrote history piece by piece, and the more you dig, the more it looks like she wanted to disappear, like she knew what was coming. But then she'd vanish for days, unreachable, leaving Adam to question if she'd ever existed at all, or if she was just another fragment of his fractured mind. The recordings June shared were eerie, fragments of static and broken sentences that felt like they were coded warnings, meant only for someone who knew how to listen. At times the voice was Kendra's, clear and resolute. Other times warped and indecipherable, as if layered with whispers of something darker beneath. Adam played them over and over, each listen stripping away a layer of certainty. Were these tapes evidence? Or manipulation? The more he tried to piece together the truth, the more it felt like it was slipping through his fingers, dissolving into some hidden dimension where logic bent and warped. His own reflection began to betray him. In the mirror, his eyes seemed stranger, hollowed out like someone else's, and nights grew longer and colder, filled with strange noises, low hums and distorted voices that melted into the silence, teasing out memories he couldn't claim. Sometimes he'd wake to find notes in his handwriting scattered on the floor, scribbled in a frantic hand with phrases like, "They don't want you to remember," or "Trust no one but the silence." But he didn't remember writing them. Were they warnings, or symptoms of something unraveling inside him? The line between nightmare and reality blurred when Adam found himself back at Hangar 17 one night, compelled by a force he didn't understand. The place was deserted, bathed in moonlight and shadows that seemed to breathe. His phone buzzed, an incoming call from an unknown number. He answered, voice cracking. On the other end, a breathless whisper that wasn't Kendra's, but something else, something ancient, laden with sorrow and menace. "You think you're seeing truth, but it's the story they tell you. The real story is hidden where memory dies." That call shattered what little calm remained. As Adam stood there, the night wind curling around him like a shroud, A deep fear settled, a primal dread that the truth behind what no one tells you isn't just about a pilot or an airline, but about the fragile boundaries of the mind itself, that the forces unspooling this mystery might be as much inside him as outside, that Kendra's disappearance was only the beginning of a story written not in facts, but in the quiet erasure of what people refuse to remember. And somewhere in the distance, beneath the hum of the city, a faint echo, her voice calling his name again. Not a warning this time. An invitation, or a trap. Adam didn't know which, but he was already inside the story, trapped between what was real and what was meant to be forgotten. And the deeper he went, the more he realized. Some truths are never meant to be uncovered, because once you cross that line, the shadows don't just follow. They consume. Adam sat alone in the dim light of his apartment, the hum of the city seeping through cracked windows like a slow leak of reality. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, a flicker of clarity teased the edges of his thoughts. A fragile glimmer that maybe, just maybe, he was on the cusp of understanding what had swallowed Kendra Whitlow and tangled his own mind in knots. The pieces had come together in an almost too perfect way. An old pilot's log buried deep in the airline's discarded archives, a handwritten note found in a forgotten locker stamped with Kendra's name, and a file marked simply Protocol 47B. Together they seemed to outline a covert operation, something beyond corporate sabotage or internal power struggles, a silent purge masked as routine procedure. It all pointed to one thing. Kendra had discovered something too dangerous, a truth someone had spent years trying to erase, and she paid the ultimate price for it. With the promise of hidden truth finally within reach, Adam felt the weight inside his chest lighten. This was the breakthrough. No more guessing, no more whispers from the shadows. He was ready to expose what they didn't want anyone to remember, to peel back the curtain on a conspiracy that went deeper than anyone dared admit. The memory, glitch that had haunted him since that night in Hangar 17, the fractured recollections that blurred dreams with reality. They began to feel like pieces of a puzzle slowly clicking into place. The mystery uncovered, it seemed, was the one that would rewrite everything. But then the past crawled back in, unwelcome and cold. Scrolling through the log, Adam stumbled on a report from years ago, almost a decade before Kendra's disappearance. It detailed an eerily similar incident, almost a mirror image. Another pilot, also young and black, named Lena Carter, was abruptly barred from her flight, dismissed without explanation, and vanished from all official records shortly after. Language was clinical, sterile. Pilot no longer authorized. Employee not to be acknowledged. Confidential incident. The report ended with a cryptic note. Subject entered a state of dissociation before disappearance. As Adam's eyes traced those words, a strange, cold shiver traced down his spine. The words dissociation and disappearance weren't just bureaucratic jargon. They were markers of something much darker. Something that felt familiar, like a memory slipping just beyond the reach of his grasp. He rubbed his temples, the edges of his vision darkening. This wasn't just a single incident. It was a pattern, a cycle repeating in silence. The unease thickened when Adam discovered an old news clip buried in the archives, grainy and almost forgotten. The anchor's voice was mechanical, monotone, but beneath it something trembled, a subtle glitch in the audio that made the words seem distorted, almost unnatural. The report spoke of Lena Carter's case, but with details that didn't add up. Eyewitnesses who had been silenced, records that had disappeared, and rumors of voices heard in empty cockpits, whispers of a name no one dared say. Watching it, Adam felt a surge of déjà vu so intense it was nearly unbearable, like watching a nightmare you've lived, but can't fully remember. The past wasn't past. It was alive, woven into the fabric of the present in ways that defied logic. He dug deeper. The lines between what was real and what had been constructed began to unravel. The logs hinted at a shadowy figure, never named, who had been observing these incidents from the very beginning. The presence was felt in the margins of reports, a ghost in the machinery that manipulated outcomes with surgical precision. It wasn't a person, not in the way Adam could understand, but a force. Psychological, atmospheric, deeply personal, like the cold whisper of something watching you from the dark spaces in your mind. The feeling wasn't new. It had been there, all along, in the static between recordings, in the silent moments before a phone call ended, in the spaces where memory refused to settle. It was watching, waiting. Adam leaned back, the room tilting ever so slightly as a creeping sense of paranoia took root. The truth he'd thought he uncovered now felt like a trap, an invitation into something far more dangerous and tangled than he had imagined. And then the detail that shattered everything, a timestamp on one of the key files he'd relied on, a date that shouldn't exist. The file was marked as created, 2 days after. Kendra's disappearance. Impossible. Someone had forged it, manipulated the narrative. And if the document that had seemed to hold the final answer was a lie, then what else was? His heart pounded with cold realization. If the truth could be rewritten, then nothing in this story was certain. Not the disappearances, not the voices, not even Kendra herself. The past and present weren't separate threads, but part of a deliberately tangled web designed to confuse, to control, to erase. And Adam understood then that he wasn't just chasing a mystery, he was being hunted by it. The phone buzzed. He didn't need to look. He already knew who it was. The screen flashed, unknown caller. Hesitating for a breath, Adam answered, and the voice on the other end was neither Kendra's nor June's. It was colder, distant, yet intimately familiar, like a shadow slipping beneath his skin. "Did you think you could hold the story? The story holds you now." In that moment, the memory of every fragment, every whispered name, every erased moment came crashing down on him like a tide pulling him under. The story wasn't a mystery to solve. It was a living thing, growing inside his mind, rewriting itself with every breath he took. The truth wasn't waiting to be found. It was waiting to find him. And whatever had been watching from the beginning wasn't finished yet. As the line went dead and the city's distant hum filled the silence, Adam realized the chilling truth that would force anyone who heard his story to watch it all again, because nothing he thought he knew was real. And maybe, just maybe, you're not crazy. They lied to you. There's a moment in the early hours of the morning when the world seems to fold in on itself, the thin veil between what you know and what you think you know growing impossibly thin, almost translucent. Adam first felt it the night he realized he wasn't alone in this, when the emails started arriving, one after another, from addresses he didn't recognize but whose content shook the foundation of everything he thought. He understood. The messages were cryptic, layered with strange symbols that flickered in and out of focus like glitching code, images of faded Polaroids that seemed to shift each time he looked away, and fragments of conversations recorded in hushed tones, voices that felt simultaneously familiar and alien, like echoes from a distant memory he could almost grasp, but never quite hold. These weren't just coincidences or random fan theories. They were breadcrumbs scattered by others who had been silently watching the story unfold, each haunted by their own fractured memories and the creeping dread of an unseen presence pulling strings behind the scenes. "You were right all along," one message whispered, the text shimmering on his cracked phone screen before vanishing as if it had never existed. There was a growing network of people, like phantoms, connected by shared experiences that felt too precise to be chance, recurring dreams where a woman's voice called their names in languages no one else recognized, fleeting glimpses of symbols carved into the back of airline badges and static-filled video clips that resembled found footage. From 20 years ago, hidden in government archives nobody was supposed to access. What the government never released was buried beneath layers of official denials and sanitized news reports. But in these digital shadows, the truth was breathing, alive, waiting for the right eyes to decode it. Amid this growing storm of uncertainty, a new perspective emerged, one that felt disturbingly lucid and detached, as though coming from someone who had been watching everything from the very beginning, unseen, and perhaps unwilling to intervene. She called herself Mara, though Adam and the others weren't sure if that was even her real name, or a carefully chosen mask to hide the one beneath. Mara's messages were different. Instead of cryptic riddles, she offered fragments of clarity, stitched with unsettling honesty and raw human vulnerability. She claimed to be the observer caught between worlds, the one who remembered the patterns others could only glimpse in fleeting moments of clarity before the fog closed in again. Her words carried the weight of someone who had lost more than most, the knowledge that identity was fluid, memory was fragile, and control was an illusion imposed by forces too vast to confront directly. Mara warned them all that what they were experiencing wasn't just a story or a conspiracy. It was a living, breathing entity, a system designed to fracture the mind and rewrite history in a loop that fed on their fear and confusion. "You are not alone," she wrote once, "but the question is, who among you remains truly you? Who remembers what you should and who has been rewritten?" The unsettling implication was clear. In this game, memory was both weapon and prison, a battleground where the truth fought to survive against the tides of erasure. She spoke of watchers behind the watchers, invisible hands guiding the narrative, making sure that the pieces of the puzzle remained just out of reach, that the story could be told, but never fully understood. The messages hinted at gatherings, in forgotten corners of the internet, encrypted forums where fragments of this fractured reality were shared and debated by those who sensed they were part of something bigger, something ancient and relentless. Visual symbols appeared again and again, an eye with no pupil, a broken circle half swallowed by shadows, a series of numbers that refused to add up, encoded warnings for those who dared to look deeper. It was as if the entire world was an elaborate stage, and the audience had been chosen, not by chance, to witness a drama scripted by something neither fully human nor fully understood. The feeling of dread wasn't just fear of the unknown. It was the weight of being watched, the creeping certainty that their lives, memories, and very identities were threads in a tapestry woven by hands beyond their grasp. Adam's own reflections began to fragment further, doubts seeping in like poison. Was he the same person who had first opened that black duffel bag in the Atlanta terminal? Or had the man he was, his memories, his sense of self, been carefully edited, rewritten to fit a narrative controlled by invisible forces? The presence Mara described felt close, like a shadow resting just behind his own thoughts, a pressure on the edges of his perception that grew heavier with every passing hour. And yet, the others, those unseen watchers connected by the cryptic messages, were proof that this force had limits. It could manipulate, distort, erase, but it could not entirely extinguish the human will to seek truth, no matter how deeply buried. As the city outside Adam's window pulsed with indifferent life, his phone lit up again, this time with a video message from Mara. The screen flickered to life, showing a grainy night vision shot of a room covered in scrawled symbols and photographs, pinned to walls in frantic webs of connection. Mara's voice was low and urgent, tinged with exhaustion. "We have been given a story to live by," she said. "A story to keep us moving in circles, chasing shadows. But the real question is, what happens when the story ends? When the watchers decide the actors are no longer needed? Watch carefully, listen closely. The game is changing." And with that, the screen cut to black. The unsettling truth settled in. The story wasn't just about Kendra or Lena or Adam. It was about all of them, about the fragile line between memory and manipulation, identity and illusion, control and freedom. The deeper they dug, the more they realized the narrative itself was alive, breathing through their collective fear and hope, rewriting itself with each new discovery. The question no longer was who had disappeared or why. It was who was still here and who among them was really in control. And somewhere in the shadows behind the screen something watched, waiting for the next move. Because this was far from over. The moment came like a slow unraveling, like the fragile thread of a dream pulled taut until it snapped, leaving behind the raw and trembling edges of something far greater than a simple mystery. Adam sat alone in the silence of his dim apartment, the weight of every shattered memory pressing down on him, as though the air itself had thickened into a fog that no light could pierce. He wasn't chasing answers anymore. The chase had ended. What now mattered was something deeper. The why. Why had this force, this invisible architect of fear and erasure, chosen Kendra, chosen Lena, chosen him? Why had it threaded their lives into this labyrinth of forgotten names and fractured truths? And most terrifyingly, what did this reveal about the human soul itself? He thought about the faces that flickered in his mind, the women taken not for what they did, but for what they symbolized. Not just black pilots silenced, but symbols of something far more dangerous to those who controlled the narrative: defiance, identity, the refusal to be erased. The story was never about who vanished or who was silenced. It was about what it meant to be seen, to be remembered, to resist the slow, relentless forgetting that is the true weapon. The mystery was the brutal, unspoken question of existence. What happens when the stories we tell ourselves, the memories that build our identities, are stolen, rewritten, or denied? Who are we without those threads to anchor us? And can we survive the knowledge that some truths are too heavy to carry? A confession pushed itself to the surface, raw and shattering in its simplicity. Adam whispered it to the empty room, the words catching like a sob. "I'm afraid, not of what I'll find, but of what I'll become when I do." The truth was a mirror, and he saw himself fractured, a mosaic of fears and hopes reflected back with cruel clarity. To uncover the truth might destroy him, unravel the carefully woven self he clung to in the face of creeping madness. Yet, to turn away was to live forever in shadows, complicit in the silence that had swallowed Kendra and Lena whole. The choice was a knife's edge, to face a terrifying awakening, or to remain trapped in the comfortable nightmare of ignorance. In this quiet crucible, the lines between the psychological and the supernatural blurred into one relentless, haunting question. Was the force that haunted their lives something beyond human? Or was it a reflection of humanity's darkest need to control, to erase, to rewrite its own story when it grew too uncomfortable? Was it a demon, a government conspiracy, or the raw, naked fear of a society unwilling to confront its own fractured soul? And if that force was inside them, in their memories, their identities, how could they ever hope to break free? Adam's phone buzzed again, but this time it was different. Mara's voice came through, not as a cryptic observer, but as a plea from a kindred spirit, someone who had felt the same fractures and longed for the same redemption. "We are not broken," she said, her voice trembling with the weight of unshed tears. "We are the story they tried to erase, and in remembering we fight back. But the fight isn't out there, it's inside us. You have to choose. What do you believe? That the darkness is the end, or that it's only the beginning?" The sanctai silence that followed was filled with everything left unsaid. The countless moments of doubt, the stolen memories, the faces lost to silence. Adam closed his eyes and let the truth settle around him like a heavy cloak, suffocating but strangely comforting in its honesty. He understood now that this was not an ending, but a terrifying awakening. A reckoning with the fragility of identity and the resilience of memory. A journey into the shadowed heart of what it means to be human. As the screen darkened, and the haunting echoes of a name whispered just beyond hearing faded into the night, the words lingered in the air, a poetic invitation to those still awake, still questioning. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for stories you were never meant to hear. Until next time, remember, some truths don't want to be found.